Paul Strauch is, he's a visionary in this sport. You know, he was the one that all of us, my generation, admired, looked up to, regarded as the ultimate surfer, and more than just a surfer, the kind of person we wanted to emulate and to be like. He was a person of tremendous grace and elegance, not only while he was riding a wave, but when he would come back to the beach. And he is like a high priest of surfing, but nobody knows it.
In Hawaii, when the kingdom was in control and the king of Hawaii had complete and utter rule over everyone that existed within that kingdom, and there were chiefs on every island. There was a grand chief, but there were chiefs on every island whose kingdom represented the people on that island, and everything fell beneath the king's jurisdiction. And so that was the whole relationship, and that was also passed on to me too, in addition to some of by my parents, my mother particularly, that had developed an understanding in me about the importance of interpersonal relationships and honoring nature, because that was a source of food, of play, recreation, and it had a very significant impact on the day-to-day lives of the Hawaiian people. I was taught by particularly my mom and also my dad, they both had a reverence for nature. When you enter the ocean, I was taught to always ask for permission. It's not just like you get out of the car when you're a youngster and you run into the sunshine and you can't wait to get to the ocean's edge, running as fast as you can, and you just run into the ocean without any regard for what's happened in the past or nature in terms of respect. So I was taught that you always ask for permission. How do you ask that question? You ask silently. You ask for the privilege of being allowed into the ocean to enjoy it recreationally and also enjoy the upliftment that it provides to your whole being. And it gave me insight because it's not necessarily a religion, but it connects you with nature, and nature is the most powerful source in our universe here on Earth, that it demands and commands respect. And so through that, it develops an understanding for all forms of life. I was taught that, and it's very special to honor not only the smallest of life, like in insects and other things, but just marvel at the beauty of nature and how having an open communion with it helps inspire you, helps ingratiate you, and provides great fulfillment. And it has done so for me. Surfing was for royalty only. You had to have royal blood running through your veins. You had to be a descendant of the king or the king's family directly. And that was the only people that were allowed to surf. And this held true for many, many years. Gradually changed, particularly when the missionaries came in. They were responsible for bringing Christianity, rather than what had been celebrated was different gods of nature by the Hawaiian community. When you really analyze it, in my opinion, they're one of the same. You know, there is a creator, and I firmly believe that. And you could look upon it as being nature. Nature is life. Life exists on different planes. What we can see with our eyes of the objects in front of us, and what we don't see, hidden by nature itself. Because at night you can't see anything. It isn't like the day. And if you look below the surface of the ocean, it's different too, because you can't see through the surface of the ocean without something enabling you to do so, like a face mask or a glass box or something. But it's all tied together. And I think the world were to realize this, to understand that we are all part of the whole, and that we have an obligation personally and individually to understand that relationship and to honor it and to be gentle and kind to one another and to all living forms of life, especially the ones that we don't see, that we look out in general and glance at the ocean and the horizon. You don't see what's underneath the ocean. You don't see necessarily what's above it because it's out of view. But having that perspective to honor others is so key to your life and your success in life.
Blake's voice of the atom,
Yeah.
is that we're all connected, even if don't appear to be, but we still are, because we all come from the same place.
Yes.
Whatever it is.
That's right.
Whether we understand what it is, I don't know. I don't have that level of understanding as to what the great,
Oh, I know.
how all this happens.
I know. One can only relate to things that are so significant and just by observation. I mean, if you look at the vastness of the sky and the vastness sitting at the water's edge of an ocean, and you can't see beyond the horizon. So, you contemplate what is beyond the horizon, what is below the surface of the ocean, what is in the sky, and the depth of the sky and what it represents, and that there is life. I mean, if is there life on the planet that we live on, you have to understand that or imagine that there's life elsewhere below the surface of the water and above it in the skies. It's just a important thing, I think, because ultimately all I would, as an individual, want to experience in life is happiness. And so I think there's a relationship to nature that makes you understand that we are all living life within our scope of an environment of our lives, are important, and how they interrelate to our lives can be increased by a greater understanding and an empathetic relationship with something that you don't really understand, but you want to. And the importance is to seek that information, seek a closer perspective of what you don't understand, but want to, and you have an interest in it for whatever that reason is, and to try to nurture that. And I think happiness will come back in exchange for a widening perspective of so much that exists within our realm and scope of life.
Do you think one of the connections we're missing right now is that personal connection?
Speaking from surfing, in my experience, I mean, there was nothing greater than catching that first wave and skimming across the surface of the ocean and watching the coral reef go by and the seaweed and seeing flashes of brilliance dart back and forth, not understanding it, but having an understanding that this is all surreal. This is just unbelievable. And it's nothing that you see on a daily perspective, and how important that is. And you want to find out more. And so it gave me a challenge to ask questions, ask about life below the surface of the ocean. My dad was a fisherman by hobby, and he would use a glass box. A glass box was made with a glass pane, and it came up on an angle. It had a hole cut in it so you could hold it. And it was a fishing spy piece, if you will, that you walk along the water. He used to use it to catch squid or octopus. Octopus was called squid. I know there's a difference. One has 8 legs and the other one has 10. And you'd walk along it, and there was an art to seeing squid without the glass box. Like my dad would tell me, there's a squid right there. And I said, no, there isn't. Can't even see through the surface of the water. You're making that up. So he says, look at, here, come here, take the glass box, look through it, and you'll see it. And he says, I don't see anything. You see coral and I see seaweed, and what are you looking for? He said, you're looking for the tentacles of a squid. And I said, I can't see anything. And he says, because you're really not looking. There are objects around that tell you that there's an octopus right there in the hole. So I begged him to tell me, what objects am I looking for? And so he explained that the octopus, when it travels, it usually feeds at night and hides during the day. It goes into little crevices, little small caves, and you can't believe how big of an octopus can fit in these little, small little holes in the reef. So he says, look through the glass box. What do you see that's different? And I said, as I tell her, I don't see anything different. I see seaweed, I see coral. What am I looking for? He says, see those white rocks down there? They're little pebbles. You see it? And I said, yeah, I do. He says, those rocks were pulled out by the tentacles of the octopus to get into the hole, to make that his home or her home. I said, why? And he says, because that's only because they engulfed and they filled up this little crevice in the reef. So by pulling this out, it cleared the space in the little cave for the octopus to reside. So that's a little telltale symbol that there's an octopus in the vicinity. And I said, oh, because of the overturned rocks that are white, that haven't been bleached or had sunshine on? He says, exactly. So that one little tip opened a whole new perspective to me when I was fishing. So whenever I would see that, I'd look into the hole, take something if I didn't have a spear, and I wasn't fishing for octopus, because he also taught me that you only catch what you can eat. You don't take any more than the ocean. That way, when you come back, you'll always have an abundance to select from for dinner. And that's how he fished. And so these little things I never forgot, and tried to pass them on to both my daughter and my son, Summer and Brandon. And because it was so enchanting to my life to have this information and a greater understanding of nature and how to coexist and honor nature, and also be gentle and kind to nature, to making sure that you left it a little bit better than it was when you saw it and when you walked into that environment. And I think that's the essence of my understanding of how the life here on the planet would be so much better if everybody just had a little reverence for the other person, first and foremost, and also, what nature has provided us with to have a full and rich experience.
So Duke was the father of Aloha.
Yes, indeed. Yes, he was. But again, Aloha was passed down to all the Hawaiians first. It's a combination of two segments of the word, alo and ha. Literally translated, alo means in the presence of, or to be connected to, and ha is the Hawaiian word for breath, or breath of life. And the way aloha was exchanged in old Hawaii was you'd greet a friend, and you wouldn't say aloha like they do now, like hi. Instead of saying hi or hello, you'd say aloha, typically now. But the old greeting was different. It was where you'd come up and you'd see someone that you knew and you wanted to greet them, and that you would come into close contact with them. And the essence was to exchange your spirit or your breath of life with them. And you do that by putting your forehead on their forehead, look them eye to eye, your noses are almost touching, and you'd look at them and you'd take a breath and you'd expel it and go like this. And as the breath was expelled from your mouth and being, it represented your life, and your life in so many different ways in a composite. And it was exchanged with the breath of the person that you were greeting. And that was just a very tender and dear way that the Hawaiians had reverence for nature, for what was being provided to them, and also for each other. It was a wonderful lesson to learn. And I hope and hope by sharing that, you won't think it's kind of funny or weird or have any other aspects, sexually or otherwise. That's not what I'm trying to. It's an honest, sincerest way you can greet somebody else and express, your heart, through your expelling your breath of life and exchanging it with them, and you're looking them eye to eye with sincerity and compassion.
Those visitors that came and shared that experience.
Yeah, I think, the missionaries, when they came, their whole purpose was to bring religion and Christianity to a very tribal and in their opinion, ignorant group of people. And they didn't understand, how much reverence the Hawaiians had in their day-to-day life, because it was ingrained to them by their parents and their forefathers to honor all life and to only use life or that exists in the sea and in the air and what you can plant, and don't use more than that, and to always share it. And that was a big lesson to me, and it took time for me to understand that, especially when we'd sit and we'd have for dinner and there would be a prayer said, and to listen closely to the words that were used and the significance of the meaning behind that. And it was all expressed with sincerity and a real compassion for life in general and for each other.
It occurs to me as you say that it was a life very undistracted.
I mean, if you look at how we live today, I mean, it may be different because of all the accoutrements of life that we have from what, their life was. I mean, much more simpler. But nonetheless, I mean, you have all aspects of life, and focus and attention and real true understanding comes with time, and it's a nurturing that happens. It just doesn't happen automatically. And so the same trials and tribulations that all life goes through in its evolution, I mean, it's not uncommon. It's common. Yeah. Patience is a big virtue.
Well, that's quite a statement.
Yeah.
Patience is an enormous virtue.
Compassion doesn't come easy. To have heartfelt feelings for somebody else usually comes after you come to the realization that they have somehow impacted your life in a way that feels good, that you feel good about them. And it's just little warm fuzzies, I guess, would be the way to express it, that attract you and highlight, your relationship. And it's like your parents. I mean, when you're young, you're running free and wild, and you have no decorum, and you have to be guided, in some ways harsh, back to reality, and a common respect for others that you live with first and foremost, but others outside of the home. It takes time to understand that the most important person in your world is you, and you're so open to trying to, in your own way, experience everything, because the things that feel good are important, and that's what's important to you. You feel good after you have had a nice meal, and you feel energized. And the same thing comes from other ways, the sunshine on your body, and seeing a bird fly by and land close to you, and trying to run after it and have it land on your hand, and finding out that it's next to impossible, no matter how fast you are. And little things like that. But it's just a growth, and it comes slowly, and hopefully everyone will be conscious of it and come to a greater understanding by just being patient.
Derek said, you really have to put your time in if you want to feel the magic.
Surfing forces you to be patient, and the reason is there's there's so much of the dynamics going on that you have to come in to understand. You watch somebody catch a wave, like in Waikiki. You sit on the beach and you watch a canoe go out. That's the largest object in the surfing lanes. And it goes out, usually filled with 6 people or less. And they go out and they turn around and they wait. And then you see them all paddling and the paddles coming up out of the water, hopefully in unison. And that's what it's supposed to be. And, you know, they ride up the back of the wave and then they come down the wave. And they're all usually excited and the experience is great. There's water flying all over and you're rushing towards shore and it's amazing, you know, to you for the first time. And it's a thrill that you haven't experienced for it before. And it's special, you know, and so you just don't know how to react. And it's just a natural thing to do. And then you want to go have another wave. God, let's do it again. And so they usually catch 3 to 5 waves, these beach boys. And those beach boys are unsung heroes of Hawaii because in addition to the missionaries who came over, saw the value of acquiring land and profiting from it as well, you know, developing it, raising agricultural products, selling it. I mean, they came from societies that were more conventional, you know, elsewhere, more organized, and had greater impact. And they realized the value of land. And so they brought the gospel, but they also brought a perspective of how important it was to acquire land. It changed Hawaii in so many different ways. But it wasn't an easy task because custom there prevented it from happening automatically. And so they had to learn the culture and they had to work within the framework of the culture to a large degree before they became closer, ingratiated, and given more respect and honor. But it's a sad statement that, you know, the Hawaiian people still live there. And, you know, the great mahele that happened in the late 1800s by King was significant because it gave the opportunity for land to be identified and reserved for those of Hawaiian blood. And it still exists. It's called homestead land.
Last week you told me about paddling out of Waikiki and how it's still the same today.
That's right. I mean, it was like that to me because, you know, in the late 50s when it wasn't, there were hotels. The Royal Hawaiian was there and the Moana Hotel and the Surfrider Hotel. And the rest of the developments there were very small. They weren't very large buildings. You come down to the beach and the most exciting thing as a child is to get out of the car and help carry everything from the car down to the beach, get set up. But your mind is on a one-track perspective, and that's to jump in the water and enjoy the sunshine and to play. You know, and you look out when you're running down to the water's edge and you look out and it looks as it's always looked. You know, you got a horizon and you got the shore break lapping up and with the warm water caressing your feet and ankle. And you look out at the horizon and everything's just like it always has been. And that's the one thing that's never changed. You know, truly, I mean, I stand at the water's edge in Waikiki and it's the same. If there are waves, the waves are breaking over the reefs that I had the good fortune to come to know and to surf on. Memories of Duke Kanamoku come to mind too.
After we had finished filming, the B camera was still rolling. Paul and I were laughing about a Donald Takayama story. We never saw this until I was editing. It's all connected.